this is really a development of the idea of light as solid objects. I completed a performance piece called Etched, so I was working with a performer, and I was really trying to examine how these solid light structures could interact with a live performer, how they would define what the live performer was able to do, how they could move through it, under it, over it, interact with it. The performer then would interact with the light objects or inform the light objects. So it was really important for me to be able to do live manipulation using the iPads in a performance. This piece then is an installation piece. There's no performer. It's called On Slow Violence, which is a slightly odd title. But it is an interactive piece. Visitors are encouraged to wander around, interact with the iPad control surfaces, to manipulate the light structures that are being projected into the space, to create interesting visual vistas, I suppose. The term on slow violence was first coined by an American academic called Rob Nixon, and he used it to describe the almost constant but imperceptible damage that is done to perhaps ecology, but also by, or to, I should say, communities, particularly poor communities in rural areas. These kind of large-scale cataclysmic events like deforestation or desertification, any kind of large oil spill or man-made disaster, they don't have the immediate visual impact that something like the Twin Towers had, the horrific terrorist attacks that we see plastered across our news screens on a daily basis. But they are as devastating to these local communities, particularly poor rural areas, over long periods of time. So he coined this phrase, slow violence. And really what I'm trying to do here is build perhaps a little bit of an artistic response to that phrase, slow violence, which is why it's called On Slow Violence. And participants, visitors to the piece, are able to create their own light ecology, if you like. They can create large planes of light. They can manipulate those large planes of light. A number of people working together can create up to 5 projected light structures that in some way can interact. And one person's action on one of the iPad control stations can indeed impact on another control station's projected light. So there are consequences of manipulation, really, within all of these different areas. It's not trying to solve problems, it doesn't have any answers, it's just trying to respond to that phrase, slow violence in some way. My professional background, if you like, was in theatre sound, theatre lighting, and I wanted to try and experiment with different ways of using light that, I suppose, subverted the traditional methods of theatrical lighting. So I wanted to get away from using theatrical lighting fixtures like the ones we've got above our heads. And so I'm experimenting with using light through data projectors. And I wanted again to move away from traditional control methods. So I'm not using a lighting desk at all. I'm using iPads to manipulate a program called Isadora, which is generating graphics and then is being projected through these bits of kit here. And then rather than have light viewed as something that simply plays on a surface, so to illuminate a set or to illuminate a performer of some sort, I'm projecting simple graphical images through theatrical haze. So I'm much more interested in the visibly tangible 3D object that appears within the space rather than the resultant image of what is being projected on a wall or a surface area. So it's kind of light play in 3 dimensions rather than the standard theatrical lighting practice for illumination, mood, atmosphere, that kind of thing. So I'm really interested in treating light in this way as an object and see if it can be used to create scenic devices for live performance, or perhaps pliable or playful objects within an interactive installation setting. Okay, so this is a program called Isadora, and I suppose this is the brains behind the Onslow Violence installation. It's a programming language, but not a text-based programming language, so we have lots of little blocks that you can see around here, and each block will do a different thing. We have a column of blocks here which are called lines, and the job of that, very simple, is to draw a line on a screen. This graphic that we have here is what is output from Isadora at the moment, and we have a solid line here, and actually that solid line is made up a number of smaller lines, but they're all connected together now, so it looks like a single solid line. Within Onslow Violence then, that line would be projected through haze, so we don't simply get a line projected onto a wall at the end of a room. We get a plane of light that appears from the projector to that line on the wall, and it's really that 3D object in the middle of the space that I'm particularly interested in. So when I'm working at the computer, I'm working within this two-dimensional setup, and I kind of have to visualize in my mind's eye how that projected line is going to look in 3D space. The reason that it's made up of lots of individual lines is because when somebody comes to control the piece using a control surface, so here's the control surface that manipulates this, then various things can happen to it. So as I move this particular fader up, you can see that the individual lines that make up that larger line then start to ripple using this ripple control here. This surface here generates what's called open sound control data, and this iPad is connected to this iMac through the same wireless network. Open sound control data is then passed from this control surface to Isadora. So this little actor here, these little blocks are called actors, listens for open sound control information. So as you can see, if I move this slider, you get a change in the value at that point there. And as that's changing, it's passed along to these various other actors which will manipulate and alter the position of the individual lines in the space. And again, it's about looking at that and thinking, well, how will that translate to a 3D space once each of these are projected individually through the haze. So yeah, so this control surface here is controlling the projector opposite. So we've got a light beam that's extending above my head here, and then you've got a series of sliders and rotary controls here where you can manipulate what it does. So this slider stretches the plane of light out to a point at which it sort of starts to split apart. And if you can hear in the background, it generates a kind of elastic sound to the point of breaking, and it'll just keep there, and it kind of develops this tension of its own. And then you've got a big square button here that will snap, and it'll create a kind of light explosion. The sound happens, and then it resets. So we've now got plane of light again back at the front, and it's reset here. There's a couple of other things that it does. We can create some colour. So using the colour control here and getting rid of this one, which bleaches it, you can see that we can start to scroll through some colours. And again, it just allows people to just play. It's very much about just playing, really, and experimenting with visuals. You've got a rotary encoder here that can start to move the plane of light, and if you keep going with it, it starts to break up into sort of kaleidoscopic projections like so. And again, you can just press the snap button and all that tension is released, and it'll reset back to normal. This one's a different control surface again. We have a square here that has two blobs, and it means that we can control the position of a light plane, so we can move it up so that it becomes a sort of ceiling, I guess, or we can switch it around so it becomes more of a wall or something that scans across like so. And you can build up to 5 planes, so once we've positioned one like that, we can then choose another one and then create another one in a kind of different space. Pick another one, pick Take another one. And then the final one. Hello, so we're here at the University of Kent International Festival of Projections. We're in the Jarman Arts Building, Jarman 2 studio, and as you can see, we're all set up and ready to go. The exhibition opens in about half an hour. The haze machine is just starting to kick in, so we haven't got any haze in the space at the moment, so it's all looking a bit bare. But it's exactly the same kind of setup that we had at Anselm Studio 2. We've got the 5 iPad controllers. We've got 4 projectors facing each other, and then we've got the 5th projector, which is rigged up in the ceiling. And hopefully, at 2 o'clock, we're going to have a load of people coming in to play around with it, and we'll just see how it goes. The day after Onslow Violence was presented as part of the University of Kent's International Festival of Projections. It was presented across 2 days. I'm estimating that about 200 people saw the piece and engaged with the piece across those 2 days. One of the things that I was really keen on doing was seeing how people would interact with the control system without knowing anything about it. So simply being able to walk into a room, find an iPad control surface, and then start to do something that they could see as meaningful in some way, or actually generate some kind of effect. Looking at some of the feedback, I mean, I've not really had a chance to look through all of this, but There are many, many comments that reply to a specific question that relates to the use of the iPads and the control surfaces. And many of them are saying easy to access, easy to control. Quite a few of them saying I had to spend a bit of time exploring the control system, but finally, once I'd worked out exactly what it was doing, then I could spend quite a bit of time. And people are commenting that they're spending maybe up to 20 minutes, half an hour, either playing with the system or simply being in the space itself, which I find really encouraging. It means as an installation, I think it was an effective place to be for them. But it does seem that the control system then, that I was slightly worried about, I suppose, at the beginning of this whole process, seems to have been accessible enough for people to come in, use and make something meaningful, which is great.